Welcome back to the deep dive. Well, we're the place you come to get through the dense source material, the complex stuff, and really find that clear path to understanding big global issues.
And today, wow, we're diving deep into something where culture, identity, raw political power, they just collide.
Yeah, and on a really unlikely stage, the football pitch.
Specifically, we're looking at how this one sports club in Iran, Tractor Sazi FC, a lot of people know it as Turkster, how it was transformed, not really by choice, I mean more out of political necessity,
Right.
from just being about the game into this incredibly potent site, a site of intense political struggle, cultural struggle.
So our mission today, based on the research we've looked at, is to really unpack that whole story. The rise of Tractor Sazi FC, TSFC in Iran, and its central, you really can't deny it, its role in this long, long civil rights movement, the movement of the huge Turkish ethnic minority in Iranian Azerbaijan.
And the core question, I think, the burning question we really need to get to the bottom of for you, the listener, is this. You've got this highly centralized state. It's multi-ethnic, but conventional political protest, freedom of expression. They're just brutally suppressed.
Right. No space for it.
Exactly. So how does a regional football club become the main way people assert their ethnic identity? How does it become the place for, like, linguistic resistance
Yeah.
and mount this sustained, very visible challenge to the state's power structure?
It's a huge leap. And the fact that grounds this whole thing, the one that just shows you the scale of this transformation, Tractor Sazi FC, founded way back 1970 in Tabriz.
Which is the biggest city in Iranian Azerbaijan.
Exactly. It evolved dramatically, especially after hitting the Iranian Super League. It stopped being just, a local team.
It became something else entirely.
The source material shows it became the single most important symbol of ethnic identity for millions of Turks right across Iran. That's an enormous weight for a sports club to carry. Unexpected, too.
Totally unanticipated. And to understand how that happened, how Tractor was sort of forced to fill this massive vacuum, we absolutely have to get into the historical context first. This deep history of ethnic marginalization coming from Tehran.
Yeah.
This wasn't some sudden thing. It's been building for like a century.
And it's important to frame this right, because when we talk minorities in Iran, the Turkish ethnic minority, it isn't small. Not at all.
Well, far from it.
It's widely believed to be the largest non-Persian group in the whole country. Estimates put it somewhere between, 25, maybe 30% of the total population?
That's the range, yeah. Mainly concentrated in Iranian Azerbaijan, up in the north and northwest.
Think about that for a second. A quarter, maybe nearly a third of your citizens feeling marginalized by state policy?
And it's systemic oppression.
Right.
It really goes back to the formation of the modern Iranian nation-state, 1925, under the Pahlavi regime. The core goal then, and it continued in different ways later, was basically forced assimilation, trying to absorb what they saw as these, potentially disruptive regional identities into one Persian whole.
So how did they enforce that? I mean, this wasn't just cultural neglect, right? We're talking about active policies.
Oh, absolutely active. For Turks and also other non-Persian groups, Kurds, Palaks, Arabs, Turkmens, they face these relentless policies, all aimed at creating this ideal of a single nation, single language, single identity.
And what did that actually look like day to day for an Azerbaijani Turk living through that?
Well, the methods were pervasive, really designed to stamp out any public expression of a distinct identity. So banning publications, cultural associations, if they were in Turkish.
Wow.
Forcing Farsi, the official language, in all levels of education. Even changing place names, geographic markers to try and erase the Turkish heritage from the map.
Just scrubbing it clean.
Yeah, and the education system was probably the most powerful tool they had. It was deliberately structured to make the mother tongue, Turkish, seem illegitimate, to enforce this linguistic hierarchy where Farsi was supreme.
So the whole point was reinforcing Persian cultural nationalism as the only legitimate identity.
Exactly. And framing any non-Persian identity as secondary or worse, as some kind of threat to national unity.
Okay, so the activism that eventually bubbles up in response, it focuses, understandably, on peaceful cultural demands. Linguistic rights, mostly.
That's right. The source material really highlights this. The biggest, most consistent demand from activists is the right to education in their own mother tongue, in Turkish, especially for their kids.
And this is where it gets, infuriating, right? The constitutional paradox.
Yes, Iran's own constitution, Article 15 specifically.
Yeah.
It says, okay, Farsi is the official language for government stuff, textbooks, fine. But
What?
it says the use of regional and national languages in the press and mass media, as well as for teaching in schools the literatures written in them, is permitted in addition to Farsi.
Wait a minute. Permitted. Explicitly. So if the Constitution literally guarantees the right to teach literature in your mother tongue, why are activists demanding this exact right being suppressed, arrested even? How does the state justify that?
That's the absolute crux of the state's strategy. The text of Article 15 is there, sure,
Yeah.
but the actual power, the institutions of government, they just maintain ethnic exclusion by, well, failing to implement it.
So deliberately not providing the resources.
Exactly. No budget for it, no teacher training programs, no official Turkish textbooks, nothing needed to actually uphold that part of the law.
Okay.
So when activists then protest this failure to implement the law, the state's justification completely pivots. It shifts entirely to security.
The security argument. Always security. So they criminalize the peaceful demand itself.
Precisely. Turkish rights activists just asking for basic cultural and linguistic recognition, they get instantly viewed through the security lens. And they're hit with these vague, sweeping accusations like promoting pan-Turkism.
Okay, we need to pause there. Because pan-Turkism, for listeners outside this specific context, that might just sound like some political science term. But when the Iranian state uses it in a prosecution, what does that really mean? What's the implication? Why is it seen as such a threat?
It's incredibly charged. The state uses pan-Turkism specifically because it taps into this historical political ideology about uniting all Turkic peoples. So by slapping that label on local, peaceful, cultural activists.
They're painting them with a much bigger, scarier brush.
Exactly. They're doing two things at once. First, they're implying these activists aren't just asking for language rights. No, they're actively working to break up Iran.
Separatism.
Right. Treason, essentially.
And second, it lets the state define them as agents of foreign powers, usually pointing fingers at, say, the Republic of Turkey or maybe other Turkic states.
Which immediately delegitimizes everything they stand for domestically. You go from being a citizen, asking for rights, to a foreign agent, a spy, a traitor. Precisely. And if you look at the state's official discourse, how they talk about these activists, it's always about threat. There's separatists, spies, traitors, agents of foreign powers. It's pure ideological framing.
And that framing reinforces the dominant group's own self-image too, right?
Absolutely. The dominant Persian group gets to define themselves as, the unquestionable, the undeniable, the authentic owners of the country. And their job is to protect Iran from these dangerous foreign-influenced internal threats.
It creates this impossible situation, a total zero-sum game. If any demand for recognition, even just cultural rights, is automatically framed as a step towards treason, well, the state effectively slams the door shut on any conventional political space.
The street protests, university activism, trying to use media outlets, all of it becomes incredibly dangerous, if not impossible.
The resistance, the need for expression, it doesn't just disappear.
No, it can't.
It's forced to look for somewhere else, somewhere completely new, somewhere massive, somewhere publicly acceptable, somewhere it can survive.
Which brings us right back to the stadium.
Exactly. So if that traditional political stage is blocked off, if even asking for your constitutional language rights gets you branded a traitor, where does a massive chunk of the country go to express itself?
This is where we get into this global idea of political football. And the source material explicitly connects the Tractor Sazi struggle to this really powerful worldwide history of resistance using sport.
Right. It's not unique to Iran, this phenomenon.
Not at all. The core idea, which our sources explain really well, is that when you lack those democratic outlets, when freedom of expression is just denied, sport, and especially football, with its huge crowds, its emotion, its mass environment, it can be transformed. It becomes a relatively safer space for people to contest power, to awaken political consciousness.
Safer how? Why is a stadium safer than the street?
Well, think about it. Authorities are often, maybe hesitant, to use really heavy-handed policing against tens of thousands of cheering fans, especially in a space that's internationally recognized as just sport, right?
Right.
It looks bad. It draws attention.
Okay, that makes sense. And the sources give some amazing historical examples of this instrumentalization of sport. Globally, you see anti-colonial movements using it as a weapon. The classic one is the FLN football team in Algeria, late 50s.
Oh, the FLN team, yeah.
Yeah.
That's a fascinating case. They were linked to the National Liberation Front, the political group fighting the French. In '58, a whole group of professional Algerian players, many playing for top clubs in France.
Wow.
They secretly slipped out of France, gathered in Tunisia. It was this incredibly audacious act of self-exile, a huge political statement.
And what was the strategy behind that? Just forming a team?
It was way more than that. They used football quite literally as a weapon of war and a tool of diplomacy. They traveled all over Eastern Europe, Africa, Asia playing matches.
So like unofficial ambassadors.
Exactly. They were raising the revolutionary movement's flag, singing their anthem, basically projecting their cause onto the global stage before Algeria was even recognized as an independent state.
Right.
The very act of fielding a team was like preemptive nation building through public diplomacy. They forced people to acknowledge their political identity.
That's incredible. Using sport to basically will a nation into existence on the world stage. But we also see this pattern within established countries, right? Where the resistance is more regional or ethnic, not strictly anti-colonial.
Yes, and that's the closer parallel for Tractor Sazi. Think about disenfranchised groups in Europe. Catalans, Basques, Galicians in Spain. They famously use their regional football clubs to promote their distinct national identities, often against central state pressure.
And the huge parallel here, the one everyone points to, is FC Barcelona.
Barca, undeniably. FC Barcelona is the critical case study. Throughout the 20th century, especially under those military dictatorships, Primo de Rivera, and later, much more brutally, Francisco Franco, Catalan identity, the Catalan language. They were subjected to intense official bans, state-sponsored suppression.
Can you give us a sense of how severe those Franco-era bans were? Because it wasn't just like discouragement, it was systematic erasure, wasn't it?
No, absolutely. It was cultural repression backed by state terror. The Franco regime banned using Catalan in public life. You couldn't register babies with Catalan names. All political campaigning, any cultural institutions that weren't approved by Madrid, shut down. Catalans were essentially stripped of the means to campaign politically or even just speak their language openly without fear.
So in that vacuum, the sources say FC Barcelona had to bear the burden of resistance and representation. The club became the stand-in for Catalan nationalism, for the desire for freedom, even their motto.
Exactly. The motto, Make un club bleu, which means more than a club, that emerged precisely because the club's role went so far beyond just football. It became this charged space for all the forbidden desires, the desire for cultural expression, for free speech, for protest. Barca's stadium, Camp Nou, it became a sanctuary.
There's this great quote about the psychological shift. Carl Rexach, former player, coach. He talked about how Catalans had no political parties, no regional government, no right to use their own language. But then at a Barca match, people suddenly realized, hey, I can shout in Catalan here. I can sing our traditional songs here, when they absolutely couldn't do it anywhere else in public.
And that realization, that collective experience, that's the key sociological mechanism. It applies directly to the Azerbaijani Turks and Tractor Sazi. That moment where tens of thousands of people express something forbidden together, it's a profound psychological awakening.
It confirms you're not alone.
Exactly. It confirms your identity is shared, that there's collective power, even if it only feels real for 90 minutes. That's how football creates, as the source says, the conditions of possibility for later political mobilization.
The stadium becomes the incubator.
Yeah, a space where those forbidden feelings are carried, displayed, shouted, sung, affirmed, and internalized as a form of collective power.
So, okay, the mechanism seems very similar. The oppression faced by Catalans under Franco, the ongoing assimilation policies in Iran, it resonates. But is the Iranian situation maybe even more precarious? Given the immediate history of arrests just for cultural expression, the risk level feels higher.
I think you're right. The risk is definitely more immediate, more persistent in the Iranian context, which actually makes the strategic importance of the stadium for Tractor Sazi FC even more critical.
How so?
Well, in Spain, the bans were harsh, but they were tied to a specific political regime, Franco's dictatorship, which eventually ended. In Iran, these assimilationist goals, this pressure, it's persisted across different political eras. It's more constant.
A permanent state of affairs, almost.
So for TSFC fans, the stadium isn't just a place to, remember a forbidden culture, like it might have been sometimes for Barca fans. It's arguably the last remaining high-visibility public space to actively assert that suppressed culture right now against ongoing pressure. It's more urgent, maybe.
Okay, let's bring this back squarely to Iran, then. Tractor Sazi FC gets promoted to the Iranian Super League. This isn't just a sports story. You're saying this was the vital political spark.
It was the necessary platform. Suddenly you have this massive national visibility. And it allowed Turks from all the Turkish-populated regions of Iran, not just Tabriz, to rally around the team.
So it transcended its local roots?
Instantly. It stopped being just Tabriz's team and became this collective identity symbol for Azerbaijani Turks everywhere.
And this transformation provides that key ingredient for political organization you mentioned, the regular mass gathering.
Yes, the weekly ritual of the match. This allows fans to form this incredibly strong collective identity. It's what political theorist Benedict Anderson called an imagined community.
Right, the idea that people who've never met feel this deep connection.
Exactly. A horizontal bond based not just on supporting the same team, but crucially on a shared language, a shared culture, and importantly, a shared struggle against those assimilation policies coming from the center, from Tehran.
So the game itself becomes a ritual that builds that community.
It does. They feel connected to millions of others like them. It directly challenges the state narrative that tries to isolate minority groups, make them feel alone and powerless. The weekly gathering at the stadium is this powerful counter-narrative. It shouts, "We exist! Look how many of us there are!" Ethnic solidarity made visible.
And this symbolism inevitably sets the club up against the center of power, doesn't it? It creates that classic center versus periphery dynamic.
Absolutely. Tractor Sazi FC comes to symbolize Azerbaijan, the region, the marginalized periphery.
And its rivals, they fit the bill perfectly, too.
They're the ideal political foils,
Yeah.
specifically the big Tehran-based clubs, Persepolis and Istiklal. We need to be clear why they represent the center.
Yeah, why them specifically?
Well, historically, they are the two most successful, wealthiest, best-supported national teams. They're synonymous with the political and economic hub Tehran, and with Tehran's historical dominance over the rest of the country. For many Tractor fans, those clubs are seen as proxies for the state itself.
So when Tractor plays Persepolis or Istiklal, the stakes go way beyond just winning the match.
Infinitely higher. Games against these Tehran rivals, especially if they're played in Tabriz at Tractor's home ground, they're interpreted by the fans as these intense micro-political struggles.
Like a battle acted out on the pitch.
Exactly. It's a chance for the marginalized region to flex its muscles, show its economic power through the crowd size, display its cultural visibility, demonstrate its resistance to the dominant political center. A win isn't just a win, it feels like a regional victory over the central government stand-in.
So the very presence of this strong, regionally identified club challenges the whole narrative of Iranian nationalism, the one that's been pushed for nearly a century.
It completely disrupts it. It challenges the assumed dominance of Tehran's big two clubs. It disrupts the myth of their cultural and sporting superiority over the provinces. The identity that Tractor fans express is fundamentally counter-hegemonic. It runs directly against the grain of the established power structure.
And you can feel the emotional investment behind that. The source material talks about how nearly a century of feeling marginalized, ignored by Iran's rulers, that's now being channeled, negotiated through this club. For the fans, football stops being just a game. It becomes, quote, a ritual performance that serves as an avenue through which the identity of the community is expressed and affirmed. The team basically carries all the hopes, the narratives, the desires projected onto it by its supporters.
And that's a critical distinction. The team's actual performance on the day, whether they win or lose, often becomes secondary to its symbolic function.
Right.
If they win, fans feel validation for their identity, their region. If they lose, well, often they see it through the lens of political conspiracy, maybe biased refereeing, the center rigging the game somehow, which just confirms their sense of struggle and marginalization.
The symbolism is inescapable either way. Okay, so it sounds like a kind of noble substitution for direct political action. But the sources are also very clear that when the stadium becomes this ideological battleground, it also becomes a very public stage for the ethnic hostility, the racism that might be more hidden or disguised in wider society.
That's the really dark side of it. The tragic trade-off. Iranian football stadiums turned into this raw, open terrain for fighting out ethnic differences, where the other, the Turk, the Arab, the Afghani, is frequently depicted in this really ugly racialized way as, quote, aggressive and barbaric.
And this isn't just random insults from a few bad apples.
No, the sources suggest this is the public performance of a deeper institutionalized racism, made audible, made visible.
And this systemic hostility got so bad, so overt, that it actually led to an international complaint in 2010.
That's right. Azerbaijani scholars, human rights activists, they felt they had no choice but to write an open letter directly to Sepp Blatter, who was the FIFA president at the time.
Why FIFA?
Because internal bodies, the Iranian Football Federation, the government, they were seen as unresponsive, maybe even complicit. They needed international pressure. And the letter detailed this horrific racism, directed specifically at Tractor Sazi fans, the Tractor supporters.
And the specific incident they highlighted, it happened during a match between Tractor and Peruzzi. That's the Tehran rival. It used to be called Persepolis.
Right, at the Azadi Stadium in Tehran, July 27th, 2010.
And crucially, the whole match, including the crowd noise, was broadcast live on Iran's state television, Channel 3. So millions of people heard this.
Yes, and the specific chants, the ones cited in the letter, they're just deeply dehumanizing. You have to hear them to understand the level of hate. Half the Peruzzi Persepolis fans from one end of the stadium chanted, "There is no braying from the donkeys."
Oh, my God.
And then the other half replied, "The Turkish donkeys are silent." Just, wow. Raw, undisguised racial aggression aimed at millions of fellow citizens.
Yeah.
And broadcast on national TV. It's genuinely astounding that there was an immediate official condemnation. From the league, from the state, nothing.
The lack of any effective response is incredibly telling, and the analysis in the source material really digs into this. The use of the word donkey, it's not random abuse. It's part of a deliberate, hegemonic, racialized discourse.
Designed to do what?
Designed specifically to deny the minoritized community its basic humanity. This language wasn't invented in the stadium. It reflects this broader ideological construct within parts of Iranian society that defines Azerbaijan and its people as somehow inferior, primitive, uncultured.
It connects right back to that Pahlavi-era idea, doesn't it? Building up Persian greatness by framing non-Persian cultures as primitive, uncivilized, underdeveloped. The stadium just provides the loudspeakers for that ideology. Exactly. And when that kind of collective sanctioned hate speech happens, and the state and the media basically ignore it or implicitly condone it by their silence, it just reinforces the marginalized status of the Turkish minority. It proves to them why they feel excluded from the national project.
But even facing that level of hostility, the stadium still remains the primary site of resistance for them. And the main weapon is language itself.
Absolutely. The dominant language you hear in the stands at a Tractor Sazi match is Turkish, exclusively.
So just by speaking,
just by chanting, singing, coordinating their support in Turkish, the fans are actively performing their identity. They're disrupting Iran's linguistic hegemony, the dominance of Farsi in public life. This is why the letter to FIFA emphasized this point so strongly. Using Turkish in the stadiums, a language officially unrecognized, effectively banned from public life, is an act that, quote, destabilizes Iran's entire racist establishment.
So even simple slogans, things like Turkish schooling or Long Live Azerbaijan, when chanted by tens of thousands in Turkish,
they become direct challenges. Challenges to the assimilation policies, challenges to the institutionalized discrimination, all happening within this space they've temporarily claimed as their own. It's strategically turning the barrier, the language ban, into a massive opportunity for political communication.
It's genius, in a way.
And the sheer volume, the consistency of this linguistic resistance, it eventually forced international bodies to take notice. The 2017 VAR report, that's Football Against Racism in Europe, they report to UEFA and FIFA.
Yeah.
They did a global review of discrimination in football, and they specifically highlighted the anti-Turkish, racist, dehumanizing chants directed at Turkish fans in Iranian stadiums.
That external confirmation is huge, isn't it?
Yeah.
It takes it out of the realm of just internal grievances that Tehran can easily dismiss as, separatist whining.
Exactly. It frames it as an acknowledged international issue of discrimination within sport. It puts pressure on Iran from the outside.
Okay, so all of this brings us back to that core idea. The politicization of Tractor Sazi FC wasn't some accident or just fans getting carried away. It was and is a vital, necessary response.
Absolutely necessary. A response to a political system that's almost completely closed off. The sources really confirm this. The strategic shift to the stadium happened because the conventional ways to participate politically, to protest, they're either entirely lacking or they're suppressed with really severe consequences.
We have to really grasp what activists can't do safely outside the stadium walls. Authorities consistently, aggressively shut down large, peaceful gatherings that are just about celebrating Turkish cultural identity.
Think about the examples the research gives. There's this annual celebration for Bebek Koramban. He's a 9th century historical figure,
Right.
a hero for Iranian Azerbaijanis.
Right.
And demonstrations marking February 21st, which is the International Mother Language Day. These are peaceful cultural events, but when people try to organize them,
Mass arrests.
invariably, mass arrests, harsh sentences, serious judicial repercussions.
So try to express your cultural identity or political concerns on the street or on a university campus, and you face swift, brutal consequences, usually framed as threats to national security.
But the stadium, It's fundamentally different. It offers this protective layer, this shield of the massive crowd, often 60,000 people or more.
Safety in numbers.
To some extent. The sheer scale of the crowd sometimes makes authorities hesitate about large-scale arrests or violent dispersal.
Yeah.
Because it's so public, so visible, it forces them to calculate the risk differently.
But it's still a calculated risk for the fans, a necessary one, to gain that public attention and show their unity.
Yes, but it's definitely not risk-free, especially not for everyone involved. The risk tends to fall most heavily on the perceived leaders, the organizers, the visible figures, and journalists covering the team.
And the source material gives us that chilling case study. Abdullah Sadoui, a football journalist.
Yes, Sadoui. He was arrested and held from January to March 2010. And his specific crime, quote, publishing posters supporting an Iranian Azerbaijani football team.
Just posters supporting the team.
That was the charge. He was accused of acts against national security and supporting pan-Turkism. And the posters, they just featured the team with a message in Turkish that said, all of Azerbaijan feels pride with you.
Let's just break that down. A simple poster expressing regional pride in a local sports team, something that anywhere else would be totally normal, maybe even encouraged.
Boosterism, yeah.
But in this context, the state immediately elevates it to acts against national security. It just highlights this absolute zero-tolerance policy towards any public expression of Turkish identity, no matter the venue, no matter how seemingly innocuous.
It confirms that even just symbolic support within the supposedly safe space of sport is immediately viewed as potentially criminal. And it shows the state is watching the stadium very, very closely. Tractor Sazi FC provides this vital opportunity for expression, yes, but it's an opportunity constantly shattered by state surveillance and the very real threat of prison for anyone who crosses some invisible line drawn by the regime.
What's also really fascinating, though, is how this platform, one at such risk, is then used for what the academics call intersectional protest, meaning the demands voiced in the stadium don't just stop at ethnic identity.
That's a key point. Tractor Sazi fans use the stadium, the space they've carved out, to talk about issues far beyond their own specific cultural struggle. It transforms the club into this broader vehicle for social commentary and change.
What kinds of issues?
Well, the sources show them using slogans, banners, chants to address things like the plight of political prisoners across Iran, critical environmental disasters, which often hit the Azerbaijan region disproportionately hard, like the drying up of Lake Urmia.
Right, a huge ecological crisis.
And also pervasive gender oppression.
And the most powerful example of that intersectionality was the protest for women's rights in 2018.
Yes, October 26, 2018. Thousands of fans, mostly men, inside Tabriz's Sahan Stadium, actively protested the long-standing state-enforced ban on women attending men's sporting events in Iran.
Chanting for women's right to be there.
Exactly. That display of solidarity, using the platform built on ethnic resistance to support women's struggle for access, that shows a critical evolution.
How so?
The infrastructure, the collective voice developed through the ethnic, anti-racist struggle, was leveraged to confront a completely different oppressive policy, a gender policy imposed by the same centralized power structure. The stadium, born out of ethnic resistance, became this ready-made critical space for a much wider discussion about gender, human rights, and state control in Iran.
It really affirms how incredibly adaptive resistance can be, doesn't it? When activists don't have the usual channels, media, universities, political parties to critically engage with these huge questions of language, ethnicity, politics.
They get creative. They strategically turn their obstacles, the very things meant to silence them, into opportunities. They leverage the unique public energy, the sheer numbers, the international spotlight that comes with football.
To assert their subjectivity, to demand recognition.
It's a profound lesson in political science, really. Suppression doesn't actually eliminate dissent. It just displaces it. It forces it into new, creative, sometimes risky cultural forms. The authorities might control the parliament buildings, the TV stations.
But the activists, at least for those 90 minutes each week,
they manage to control the message coming from the stadium.
Okay, so let's try and synthesize this. The critical takeaway, the aha moment from this deep dive. What is it?
I think it boils down to this. The whole story of Tractor Sazi FC's instrumentalization, it demonstrates a really powerful sociological truth. When your ethnic identity, your culture, your language are systematically suppressed.
Yeah.
And when all the normal ways of expressing political dissent are blocked off, social movements don't just give up. They will inevitably find new arenas, creative arenas, often massive arenas.
Even in places that seem totally apolitical on the surface, like a football stadium.
Exactly. They'll use those spaces to assert their subjectivities, to challenge centralized power. Tractor Sazi was basically constructed, piece by piece, into this symbolic representation of Azerbaijan's resistance. It became the last, most public stage for voices the central government had tried to silence for nearly 100 years.
And the sources really emphasize the impact of that persistence, the sheer strength of these civil rights movements, using literally every tool available, including sport. It makes it incredibly difficult for the dominant groups to just keep denying the existence, the language, the national identities of these marginalized groups in Iran.
Their visibility just can't be contained by censorship alone anymore. The stadium makes them too loud, too visible.
Which leaves us with a pretty provocative final thought for you, the listener, to maybe chew on.
Okay.
The success, however qualified, of this non-conventional resistance in Iran, forcing political negotiation and identity assertion into this highly public, highly emotional arena of sport. What does it suggest about the future of unitary states, states that try to impose a single identity?
Right. What is this pattern where local identity finds global visibility through seemingly non-political channels like sport? What does that tell us about the long-term relationship between centralized state power and these deeply rooted regional cultural identities, not just in Iran, but all across the world?
It definitely seems like we all need to pay much closer attention to what's happening on the pitch. Sometimes the biggest political statements aren't speeches, they're in the roar of the crowd.
Couldn't agree more.
Thank you for taking this deep dive with us today. We'll see you next time.